Well, as the saying goes, it is said that everything has been said, but not everyone has said it, so that's what I'm here to do. Many of you heard today the conversation between Enda Kenny and John, so you learned some of his credentials, which you probably knew anyway. I'm not going to repeat them all, but you would have heard his early career, his years in Vietnam, his protesting of Vietnam, Earth Day, his commitment to the planet, his time in the Senate, his effort to become president, and his time as Secretary of State, and then as a special presidential envoy on climate. But we are old friends, and I could take the friends part out and it would still work. But so I am going to just share a few things that sort of are the story behind the story, just a few moments, if you will, because he never says these things himself. Yes, he did go to Vietnam, but he was a child of privilege. He certainly did not need to go to Vietnam. He was not drafted. He did not volunteer because he was in a military program so he could go to college. He volunteered because he felt a personal duty. And while he was in Vietnam, he lost very good friends. And while he was in Vietnam, he won 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star and a Silver Star, which are the 2 of the highest awards one can get for military service for combat. He never says those things. Yes, he represented the country in terms of protest to Vietnam, but he doesn't talk about the cost to that, his personal safety and what it meant to him in terms of just his family life. As senator, he and Ted Kennedy, John was the junior senator to Ted Kennedy, and they formed the blue wall, if you will, for the Senate. They were the go-to men for so many causes that other people did not want to hear about. He doesn't talk about that. And when he ran for president, it is arguable that he could have argued that perhaps there were circumstances that he might have been considered the winner. But he not only didn't protest, he called George W. Bush, congratulated him, and then went back to work the next day as a senator and then later as the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. And as Secretary of State, yes, he traveled to more places, far-fetched and far-flung, but he also never took no for an answer. And it didn't matter that if the door was shut, he would just open it again. And in each of these cases, I'll move on to simply say that as special envoy, I had the privilege of our youngest son work for John as his speechwriter for a period of time. And he says, this man does not stop. He does not take no for an answer, and he can put the rest of us in our grave the way that he can work. And that kind of representation to young people is invaluable. So this man, who is a descendant of John Winthrop, the first governor of Massachusetts, but also a descendant of Ireland. He is, unlike most Americans, he speaks impeccable French, but he still can check you on a hockey rink. So I would just say I welcome him to the stage, and I'm delighted and privileged to call him my friend.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I accept the nomination. Got to tell you, I can now pass away in peace. I have been introduced by Anne Finucane. It really doesn't get better than that. Anne called me up. She said, John, the Ireland, they want to award you. They want to award the Impact Award for Ireland, the Ireland Impact Award. And she said, they want someone who was a legendary Secretary of State and a terrific United States Senator and who a lot of Americans wanted to have as president. Well, Hillary wasn't available, folks, so here I am. But truly, and by the way, you're going to upset George Mitchell. You gave me a hell of a lot to talk about tonight, so I can talk about all of that. And George has got me on a 5-minute mark, folks. He knows me. So I'm really just going to try and keep this relatively, honestly, short. I don't want to contribute to global greenhouse gas emissions either, so you need to do my part. At my age, there's no time to waste, so I want to be careful here. Speaking of age, I did turn 80, unbelievably. And I want you all to know, as affirmatively as I can say this, 80 is the new 60. And right, I mean, we got some companions here. And, but I have to tell you, I want to assure you, because you're looking at me now, saying, what kind of shape is he in? Is he okay? I can do all the things that I did when I was 60 at 80. I just can't remember what they are. So, working at it. That is truly the end of this tiny little piece of paper. I just want to talk to you. I want to talk to you for a few minutes. And I really mean a few. I don't want to abuse the privilege, and I don't want this to go on too long. So there are two things that I kind of really want to share with you. I said it a little bit this afternoon, but I really want to emphasize it tonight, especially after my conversations with Alan, and what he is doing, and what Venturewave is doing, and what you all are doing who are here. Yes, we're behind. Yes, we can go faster. Yes, we can do all the things I talked about earlier today. But I want to emphasize this, whether it's Trump or Kamala or wherever we go. When Trump was last president, 75% of the new electricity in the United States came from renewable. 37 states in the United States have renewable portfolio laws. So 37 governors, Republican and Democrat alike, all worked to keep in Paris when Donald Trump said he was getting out. And you saw an enormous, among those Republicans, 85%, I think I mentioned this today, of the money that's come through the Inflation Reduction Act has gone to red states. And basic politics, I don't see senators and congressmen walking in and saying, hey, get rid of that factory we built. Let's unemploy all these people we just put to work that I've been bragging about running around my state or my district. So yes, it'll be not great for so many other reasons, and it's not even going to be helpful if it were climate. But here's the point I really want to emphasize to you. ESG is a phony fabrication to scare people. It's come out of our politics of fear. But while we're playing the politics of fear, people all around the world are moving on this transition. And that's what I said about China. I won't repeat all that. But the marketplace, writ large, has made this decision. Smart CEOs know what is going to happen to supply chains and trend lines and production and all the other factors that contribute to productivity and to the ability to make things happen. That's going to keep moving. And whether it's extraordinary heat in one place or another, or the melting of the glaciers, one of the most, I find, a number of you know from the conversations I had here today, you know Johan Rockström at the Potsdam Institute. Johan's one of the best scientists in the world, and he's focused every day of his life on this issue, the climate crisis. And there is an agreement among a whole stack of scientists that, particularly those who live in Antarctic and are watching it every day, that the current level of disturbance in the Thwaite Glacier, also known as the Doomsday Glacier, is such that within 5 years, what is a dam to the West Antarctic ice sheet could shatter, go out to sea, and melt. That is a whole new ballgame. Now you're talking about sea level rise much sooner than we anticipated, mid-century, meters, certainly many feet. And so it is more important than ever that you all go out of here, and I've been really impressed by the conversation, by the commitment, the discussions I've had with a number of people. You know, this is what we need. We need more meetings like this. We need more people to come together. We need to bring the press. We need to bring politicians. They need to see what's germinating so that we can accelerate what we know we need to accelerate and get the job done. So I just want you to leave here, not now, but pretty soon. I want you to leave here confident about where you are headed, with that sense of certitude. This transition will continue. The only question now, not whether we get to a low carbon, no carbon economy, it's whether we get there in time to avoid those worst consequences. That's the first thing I wanted to put on the table. Second and final thing, I'm really proud to be here with George Mitchell, and I have such respect for him. I had the privilege of voting for him as leader of the Senate when I was there, and I worked with him. I was head of the Senate campaign committee for a period of time while George was there, and he was really an extraordinary leader. He listens to people. He evidenced that at Stormont in spades. But he said something once, I don't know if I have the right number of days, but in principle, this is right. He said, you know, at Stormont, in trying to achieve the Good Friday Agreement, he said we had 700 days of failure. We had 1 day of success. And that's all you need. And having negotiated, you know, Paris and Glasgow and Dubai and the Iran nuclear agreement and getting chemical weapons out of Syria with Lavrov and so forth, I know what that patience means, and I know what it is. And George, we really owe you, as you've heard from our Irish friends, just extraordinarily for your contribution. It's one of the best I've seen in public life. Fantastic. And I wanted to say that to you because of the imbalance between the 700 to 1 and the necessity to think about why you can be optimistic in the midst of that. I had the privilege of sharing with you some personal thoughts about optimism earlier today. But I just leave you with this story, which may be even a more powerful way to try to convey why I have hope, and we should all have hope, and beyond hope, we should know that we can win this battle. And that is this. When I came to the Senate in 1985, and Ronald Reagan was president, there began to be this issue surfacing in America about POWs and missing in action who were still alive in Vietnam. And John McCain and I were sort of wrapped up in it for various reasons. But it was hot and heavy in United States politics. And that's when the black flags began to fly in America, the POW/MI flags underneath Old Glory. And George was then the leader of the Senate. And we had a fairly, semi-whacked out senator from New Hampshire whose whole focus every day, all day long, was this issue of people who are alive in Vietnam. So the war in Iraq, the original Desert Storm, we liberated Kuwait, and President Bush asked for a group of us to go over to speak to the Kuwaitis and bring them back and thank our troops. So we flew over in the U.S. Air Force plane out of Andrews Air Force Base, and you are seated by seniority when they seat you. It's like grade school a little bit, but you kind of get lined up. And so John McCain and I, John had just come to the Senate. This is about 1986, I think he came. He was elected in 86, came in 87. And we flew over, but that night, John and I were facing each other, literally in one of those seats with a table in between. And we were nervous of each other because John had come to Massachusetts to campaign against me when I ran in 84. And he did it in a temperate, thoughtful way, no bitterness. And we had not talked much because he was a prisoner of war for 5.5 years. And I was a protester. starting 1970 when I got back. So there we are, face to face, a couple feet separating us. And I began a conversation with him. I asked him about prison. I asked him about his war. I asked him about being shot down. I asked him about what he felt about where America was right now with respect to this issue. And both of us, we learned in that conversation, thought that we should try to make peace, not just with Vietnam in reality, but make peace in America, with all of us, between liberals and conservatives and right wing and left wing and people who hated each other because they had a different opinion of the war, and they also were latching on to this idea that people were still alive. And how can you have diplomatic relations with a country that's still harboring your prisoners? Well, George will tell you that trying to prove a negative and trying to pull together the capacity to answer every family's questions proved to be a monumental task. And George, maybe I shouldn't love him for this, but he made me chairman of the committee, the subcommittee, and John was my wingman, and together for almost 5-6 years or so, we worked together. We went back to Vietnam together. We went into prisons physically with a surprise visit, with documentation that said someone was last alive here. And we looked at the walls of those prisons to see who might have scratched a message. I mean, everything was done to get to the bottom of this issue. And lo and behold, finally, we managed to get 13 United States senators, Republican and Democrat, people that George had put on this committee: Bob Kerry, Senator Bob Kerry, Medal of Honor winner, Nancy Kassenbaum was on it, Republicans, Chuck Robb, a Marine veteran from Vietnam, you name it. We had this incredible committee, and we had one issue left that we had to resolve before we would get a sign-off on a report. Bob Smith had information that Americans were alive and being held in the corridors underneath the tomb of Ho Chi Minh. So there was only one thing to do. We couldn't get a signature unless he came on board. So I flew to Vietnam, perilously afraid that we were going to lose the whole thing. And on a weekend, I flew out on a Thursday night, got there, flew in on a military plane, back to Thailand, back to Washington, one weekend. And I said to the president of Vietnam, the prime minister, I said, guys, don't hold this against me. Don't look at me. And I built a trust is very important in these negotiations. You build a relationship, you build trust. And they trusted me. And I said, if you don't want to lose this, if you don't want the New York Times putting out a story, you have got to let us go down under these corridors. And he went from, the color of a Vietnamese soldier to pale, white. American is going to go underneath the Ho Chi Minh tomb. So I got a call at the hotel, and they said, 4 a.m, you be there, and you're going down, and you're going to get to see what you need to see. So at 4 a.m, we report to duty, 2 soldiers there, take us down. We're wandering through the corridors. Bob is opening and shutting doors and looking around, I mean, insane. And at one point, we hear this gurgle, 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 swoop, bang, boom, machine going on. And it was the formaldehyde being pumped through Ho. And if you don't think for this former combatant to be underneath Ho, and I could have pulled the plug and had an impact, believe me. But that didn't happen either. So we got back, we got the signature, done. Bill Clinton held a ceremony at the White House with John McCain on one side of him and me on the other in the East Room, and we announced that we were going to open diplomatic relations with Vietnam and normalize shortly thereafter. Just this past year, I was with President Biden in Vietnam, where we announced a strategic partnership with the government of Vietnam. And both presidents signed it, and we're there. It's just a new era for a country that is now thinking about what kind of deals they're going to make with you and how they're going to do AI and how they're going to grow and where we're going to head. But the biggest part of this story is this, the moral of it all. At one point in those visits, I went to the Hanoi Hilton with John, where he spent about 2 years in that particular cell, 2.5 years. And I can't tell you how powerful it was to be standing in a cell of Hanoi where John, whom I'm talking to, ear to ear, eye to eye, having been through this experience, And he's sharing with me in the most raw way what they did and what happened. And I swear to God, what came to me in all of that was, oh my God, if a Republican conservative from Arizona who was a prisoner for several years can get over his issues and stand in a cell, which is such terrible memories for him, and I, a person who barely knew except through my imagination what it might have been like to go through what he went through, am standing there talking about our war, and both together we found common ground in a cell in Hanoi. My friends, I got to tell you, if you can do that, if one can do that, we can solve these problems. We really can. We have to look for the common ground. We have to fight for respect, mutual respect in our dealings with each other, and we have to get this world to come together and start to do the things we need to do for our people. And if you ever have doubts about whether or not I've simplified it and somehow that you can't do what I just said, remember, I also went to South Africa once, and I went to Robben Island, and I stood in Nelson Mandela's cell. And I got to tell you, I met him several times, talked to him, and he used to say, his saying, which is so powerful, he said, they always say it's impossible until it is done. How many times he heard that, I can't tell you, but that's the best advice in the world, to keep you going, keep moving, stay at it. We can overcome this moment of history. We don't have to be the prisoners of it. We have to be empowered by it. Thank you for this honor.